mentioned two books the last time you were here, and I read one of them. The one by Ross Kubler on death and dying.
Yeah.
That was a pick me up.
Yeah.
I had it, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross.
Okay.
And my brother said, boy, that was a college staple back when we were in college. But it's a good book. I've still got the Rob Bell book.
Let's go ahead and get started, and we'll give Bill time for our lesson today, and thank you for coming. Let's go through, as I'm sure all of you know that we're in the early service, know that Bill O'Brien died yesterday morning, kind of a surprise. Got a cryptic email from George this morning about seeing if David and I could video tomorrow or Tuesday, and he said the funeral was going to be on Monday the 4th. Now I understand it's going to be on the 10th, so I don't know what the I don't know the date yet. I don't know any of that. But I don't think George had much sleep at least looking at that email. But at any rate, it's a sad situation. Good man, very good man. Let's go through some church-wide announcements. I want to tell you a few things. On March 1st, we're going to have a combined Sunday school class with Court of Three, and we're going to have a short devotional to keep us on track that Charles Yarborough was going to do. They're going to give us a list of what we need to bring or whatever, but this is a very interesting thing that Court of Three is doing because they are way back in the back. You can't get much further back than they are in this building and be in this building. Nobody comes walking by their class. They are doing this as a way to meet other people within the church, and they do this about once a year. This year it's our turn, and I think it's a very nice thing Mary Carver and that crew does. So
We're gonna meet them in here?
we don't know yet. We're going to probably eat in one room and kind of greet and try have the devotional in another. So we
Keep
can't
moving,
see.
yeah.
Yeah. So
Sure.
it'll be one of those two, but we're right down from them, and it's a very nice thing for them to do. But if you don't go to Sunday school with somebody and you don't sit beside them at church, you probably don't know them. And so this is a way to get to know people outside of our group. So that will be a fun thing. Now, based on phase availability, we are targeting April 4th as a fishing trip, a class party. We'll go out to my brother's place out near Athens, where it's out in the country. But at any rate, it's a fun time if you can come.
They back from the.
They're back from Mayo. They tried 12 things. Not all of them. She bombed out of them. The last choice was open heart surgery, and that's going to either kill her or fix her. Probably in February. So anyway, that's what it currently looks like. Thanks for asking. So anyway, let's go through some church-wide announcements.
Stuff coming.
Let's see. There's a group of Wilshire friends that are touring, that are going to see the band's visit at the Windsor Opera House on February 20th. Room in the Inn still needs help. The next one is February 28th and 29th. That's coming up. The one after that is March 27th and 28th. So there's help needed for that. There's a link on their email that I send out that you can click on, and you can go find out what's needed. George Gagliardi's book is coming out. It's being published. Some hope for the holidays, and it's going to be in time for Easter. Faith in 3D is going to happen on March 6th and 7th, and they're going to do, what's the play? Oh, Lighting the Way is the name of the play for this time. CPR class is offered. That's because Lisa asked Linda, said when it was going to happen next, so now there's a class being offered. It's $25 per person to cover the disposable supplies that are used in the course. There's a film screening on Sunday, March 8th at lunchtime at noon by one of our members, Cheryl Allison, Shatter the Silence, and that will be screened at noon.
Super Bowl today.
And the Super Bowl of Caring, yes. And the Super Bowl of Caring is today, yes, thank you.
Yes.
And that'll be right after 11 o'clock service.
And George admitted in the early service that he is one of the judges and that his pockets were open. I'm
Okay.
sure they
I
are.
think it's actually from 11 to 1:30, so we can.
Oh, it's even starting, huh?
Yeah.
I think, doesn't it say 11?
Yeah, it starts at 11.
Okay.
I think there's two seatings, like there's one after Sunday school and then one after second service.
Okay, very good, very good. Any other church-wide announcements that we need to
Go back a page, page 8.
What?
Did you do those? Did you do the youth option?
No, I didn't. I skipped over that whole page. That's coming up on, that's Sunday, March 1st, the same day as our brunch with these guys. There's a community, a fundraising time for that. And I mentioned also, talking about Carolyn Murray coming on, back on staff as part-time to help with kind of bring in new folks. We've had a tremendous amount of guests and a tremendous amount of people who've joined in the last 2 or 3 years, but our numbers of guests are tailing off. So we need now to go out and try to encourage more, and Carolyn is coming on to help with that, and we're looking forward to help her with that. Anything else that I missed?
There's a new fall trip coming up, Chicago and Mackinac Island.
All
And
right.
Valparaiso, they're going to Valparaiso. And
Okay.
I am so excited because I've always wanted to see where Homer Drew, yeah. So, yeah,
All
you
right.
Baylor alums, you owe Valparaiso.
That is great, that is great, well, that's wonderful. Anything else?
The reception for Tiffany and Matt.
Is, and where is
It's the
it?
same, yeah, it's about a couple of weeks, it's the same page as the Carolyn Murray.
We'll just read it for you.
Okay, very good. All right, very good, okay.
And last call for Chicago.
Oh, yes, and last call for Chicago, it says Brian, okay. All right, well, let's get started. Bill, thank you so much for being here, we appreciate it. Here's our prayer list. Oh, also, there's an article here that if you want to make some money by being a census volunteer, working on your own hours, you can do that, and there's some information in here, and here's our prayer book as well.
I did that back in 2000.
Good morning. We're gonna do Sunday school the old-fashioned way. We're gonna read the Bible verse by verse and talk about it. So let's start with Genesis chapter 18, and this is really the beginning of the nation of the children of Israel, the Israeli nation. So let's start here with chapter 18, beginning with verse 1. The Lord appeared to Abram near the great trees of Mamre. Mamre is a hill between Hebron and Jerusalem, not far from Jerusalem, and this is where Abram was camped out. While he was sitting at the entrance of his tent in the heat of the day, Abram looked up and saw 3 men standing nearby. When he saw them, he hurried from his entrance of his tent to meet them and bowed low to the ground. Now, we have trouble understanding in our day of restaurants and motels the importance of hospitality in the ancient world. And it was particularly important to be hospitable in the tradition that produced the nation of Israel. So here Abraham was being hospitable. He said, "If I found favor in your eyes, my Lord, do not pass your servant by. Let a little water be brought, and then you may all wash your feet and rest under the tree." You remember the wedding of Cana in John chapter 2? That they had 180 gallons of water there at the wedding, and that water was used for 2 purposes: cleansing your hands before you eat and washing your feet as you entered the house, because roads were dusty, people didn't wear shoes very much at all. Open-toed sandals was the shoe wear of the day. So when you entered a home, you washed your feet, and then before you ate, you washed your hands. And so one of the acts of hospitality here for Abraham was to provide water for the washing of the feet of his 3 guests. In verse 5, "Let me get you something to eat, so you can be refreshed and then go on your way, now that you've come to your servant." "Very well," they answered, "do as you say." So Abraham hurried into the tent to Sarah. "Quick," he said, "get 3 seahs of fine flour and knead it and bake some bread." Then he ran to the herd and selected a choice, tender calf. Now, what did that remind you of?
Prodigal son.
Huh?
Prodigal son.
Exactly. When the prodigal came home, first thing his daddy did was say to the servants, "Go out and get a good young tender calf." So in verse 7, He gave it to the servant, who hurried to prepare it. He then brought some curds and milk and the calf that they had prepared and set these before them. While they ate, he, that's Abraham, stood near them under a tree. "Where's your wife Sarah?" they asked him. "There in the tent," he said. Then the Lord said, "I will surely return to you about this time next year, and Sarah, your wife, will have a son." Now Sarah was listening at the entrance to the tent, which was behind him. Abraham and Sarah were already old and well advanced in years. Many people say they were in the 90s. And Sarah was past the age of childbearing. So Sarah laughed to herself as she thought, after I'm worn out and my master's old, how will I have this pleasure? Now some of you would laugh too if somebody told you you were going to have a baby at your age.
You can't really
I
like.
don't think they'd call it pleasure either.
Be an immaculate conception for me.
I'm sorry?
Be an immaculate conception for me.
Yeah. All right. Verse 13. Then the Lord said to Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh and say, 'Will I really have a child now that I'm old?' Is anything too hard for the Lord? I will return to you at the appointed time next year, and Sarah will have a son." Sarah was afraid, so she lied and said, "I did not laugh." But he said, "Yes, you did laugh." When the men got up to leave, they looked down towards Sodom, and Abram walked along with them to see them on their way. Then the Lord said, "Shall I hide Abraham from what I am about to do? Abraham will surely become a great and powerful nation, and all nations of the earth will be blessed through him." A couple of things here that I want to draw your attention to, and then see if you have any questions or discussion to add to it. One is, many of the commentators say these were angels, these three men who visited Abraham and Sarah. If they weren't, how did they know Sarah's name? "Where is your wife Sarah?" they asked. So, were these folks angels or not?
Wasn't
It doesn't
Abraham-
really matter.
Weren't they well known though? Abraham and Sarah?
Well, that's debatable. But the point is, it really doesn't matter. They were sent by God. And so it doesn't matter if they were angels, celestial angels, or earthly angels who delivered this message. Then they ask a question in verse 14. Is anything too hard for the Lord? What do you think?
Absolutely not.
This translation says, "Is anything too wonderful for the Lord?"
And that having a child would be wonderful at their age.
We have to be careful about putting our human thoughts and feelings onto the Lord, because that doesn't work.
Even though we do it all the time.
Well, you know, the first miracle Jesus performed was turning this 180 gallons worth of water into wine. And you look at other miracles that Jesus performed that are mind-boggling. But the work of God is the work of miracles throughout the Old Testament. And I'm wondering if we today really believe is anything impossible with God. The first great miracle were the miracles designed around Moses and his delivering the children of Israel from Egypt. And I have some statistics here that sort of mind-boggling about that event. Most biblical scholars believe there were between 1 and 2 million Israelites in the Exodus. Let's take the more conservative figure, say 1 million children of Israel coming out of Egypt. When you take that figure, then crossing the Red Sea would have been 3 miles wide gap in the Red Sea for 1 million people to cross in the amount of time they did. If you take that figure, once they crossed, for 1 million people to camp, it would take 750 square miles to pitch tents for 1 million people. It would require 15 tons of food a day to keep them from starving. It would require 2 freight trains, each 1 mile long, to haul the daily supply of food for 1 million people. At today's prices, it would cost about $5 million a day to feed them. It would require 11 million gallons of water for the bare necessities for each day. If you figured 1 quail, you know, the manna, some folks say it was quail, we really don't know what it was. The word manna really means, what is it? But if it was quail, for each family of 5 to have 1 quail, it would require 750,000 quail each morning. There had to have had around 2 million gallons of manna or quail each day. Yet none of these challenges were too big for God. So it puts it in perspective a little better to ask the question, is anything too big or too hard for God to do?
No.
Now, if we really believe that, I mean, do we really believe it? If we do really believe it, what about a few thousand Hispanics down on the border coming into this country? I mean, is God big enough to provide the richest country in the world to host a few thousand Hispanic people? Is anything really too big for God? I mean, you can expand that. If the gospel's not for everyday solutions, it's not good for anything. So just expand that. Think about other issues. Today we're taking a hunger offering on the Super Bowl Sunday. I mean, do we have enough money in this country to feed the whole world? If God's involved in it? Do we? What about health care? Is God able to provide enough resources for everybody in this country to have health care? I mean, the list goes on and on. And so the issue really is, do we believe God is big enough to do everything or not? How many of you all read Richard Rohr daily? Okay, have you read Richard Rohr yet this morning?
Not yet.
Okay, read it.
Okay.
He makes the distinction this morning between orthodoxy, that is what you believe, and orthopraxy, what you practice. Now, which is more important, orthodoxy or orthopraxy?
What does that mean?
Orthopraxy means what you practice. Not what you say you believe, but what you practice.
Well, if you didn't believe it, you wouldn't necessarily practice it.
Well, people can say they're a believer and not act to the concepts or precepts.
We don't necessarily practice what we believe anyway. If you look at more mundane matters, you know, we think we ought to get up in the morning and work hard, and sometimes we don't want to, or have things, tasks that we need to perform, and we believe that, but doesn't mean we do it all, or we probably do a lot better.
So what do you think? Which is more important? Orthodoxy or orthopraxy?
Privacy.
I
Can
agree
you
with
have one without the other?
Yeah.
Yeah,
You
but
can.
orthopraxy is orthodoxy. What we practice is what we really believe. Now, we can say we believe this or that, but what we do is the real reflection of what we believe. Very simply, I believe in tithing. I can't afford to tithe, I can only give 3%, but I believe in tithing. Well, you know, do you really believe in tithing if you don't really practice it?
Well, you can't get
Tithing is
blood out of
tithing,
your
whether you give 3 or 10.
Huh?
Tithing is tithing, whether you give 3 or 10.
Yeah.
You're
No, it's
tithing.
10.
I hate to break it to you, but you are.
But yeah, but you're not practicing the biblical concept of tithing.
Okay, well, if you're starting to add little amendments to that statement, yes, then you've got some exceptions.
Yeah.
We believe in tithing, but we give what we can afford at the time.
Well, you know, I think what we do is what we believe. What we do is what we believe. And,
It's like
now-
the fruits on the tree.
huh?
It's like your fruits that you bear on the tree.
Yeah,
Good fruits and bad fruits.
yeah. So, it all boils down to that 14th verse. What God can do. Can He do everything or not?
I think he can do everything he wants,
Mhm.
but he may not want to do all I want him to.
Right.
You know,
And it may be good. But if he doesn't want to do it, he may not do it just because I think.
Right.
And I go back to the, the border crossings and all that. My thought is he ought to take care of it. He may be saying, no, we ought to take care of it and not him.
Mhm.
I think he can do all things.
Well, He does most of His work through us.
And
You know,
sometimes in
Bill,
some-
that look in this room, come here to the church every Sunday, and look at your own life. Sometimes you see your life is a product of the wonderful miracle God provided for you. And all of you probably have a story to tell what God in your life. A miracle happened. Whatever it may be. And you experience the greatness of God.
Yep.
And you, yes, later on we start worry, start complain, start forget about what God can do. But God's still there. God's still there.
Yep.
And I hope some days in our life that we can practice what we believe or what we have been experienced with godness, God.
Yep. The word salvation really means wholeness. Wholeness. And salvation comes when we are whole. And I believe wholeness comes when we practice what we believe. We can say we believe and not practice. Does that really mean we believe? So I think wholeness comes, salvation comes when we are united inside of us by doing what we believe. Now, I don't know of anybody who does that all the time, you know, we just don't. But the more we do that, the more whole we are. And so here at the very beginning of the nation, a marker set down. God can do anything. And that's important for us to keep in mind when we see the trials and tribulations of the nation as they develop through the years. All right, any other comments, questions, statements, challenges, tomatoes thrown as we look at the first 18 verses? All right, let's go on then to chapter 21, verses 1 through 4. Now the Lord was gracious to Sarah, as he had said, and the Lord did for Sarah what he had promised. Sarah became pregnant and bore a son to Abraham in his old age at the very time God had promised him. Abraham gave the name Isaac to the son of Sarah that Sarah bore. And when his son Isaac was 8 days old, Abraham circumcised him as God commanded him. Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born. All right, this is the actual birth of Isaac and the starting of the promise of God that Abraham is going to be the father of more people than the sands of the sea. Notice the first thing that Abraham did was to have Isaac circumcised. Now this is completely irrelated to the text, but our daughter went to Baylor in 1992, and we went down there to see her a few weeks after she had been settled in. And on the bulletin board in her dorm was a picture out of the Lariat. Now the Lariat is a student publication at Baylor that's a little off the wall. Sometimes it's a lot off the wall. And on the bulletin board was a picture of of Moses looking up toward heaven saying, "You want me to cut off what?" Well, that's a little irreverent, I guess, but it goes to the point that Abraham did what he thought the Lord required, and that was to have his son circumcised soon after he was born. All right, let's look at the final passage today, chapter 22, verses 1 through 18. And this gets interesting. Sometime later, God tested Abraham. He said to him, "Abraham?" "Here I am," he replied. Then God said, "Take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the region of Moriah." Now Moriah is a hill right outside the walls of the ancient city of Jerusalem, not far from Mamre. Take your son, sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains I will tell you. Early the next morning, Abraham got up and saddled his donkey. He took with him 2 of his servants and his son Isaac, whom he had cut enough wood for the burnt offering. He set out for the place God had told him about. On the 3rd day, Abraham looked up and saw the place in a distance. He said to his servants, "Stay here with the donkey, while I and the boy go over there. We will worship, and then we will come back to you." Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering and placed it on his son Isaac, and he himself carried the fire and the knife. As the two of them went on together, Isaac spoke up and said to his father Abraham, "Father?" "Yes, my son," Abraham replied. "The fire and the wood are here," Isaac said, "but where's the lamb for the burnt offering?" Abraham answered, "God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son." And the two of them went on together. And when they reached the place God had told him about, Abraham built an altar there and arranged the wood on it. He bound his son Isaac and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. Then he reached out his hand and took the knife to slay his son. But the angel of the Lord called out to him from heaven, "Abraham, Abraham." "Here I am," he replied. "Do not lay a hand on the boy," he said. "Do not do anything to him. Now I know you fear God because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son." Abraham looked up, and there in a thicket he saw a ram caught by its horns. He went over and took the ram and sacrificed it as a burnt offering instead of the son. So Abraham called that place, "The Lord will provide." And to this day it is said, "On the mountain of the Lord it will be provided." The angel of the Lord called to Abraham from heaven a second time and said, "I swear by myself, declares the Lord, that because you've not done this and have not withheld your son, your only son, I will surely bless you and make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and as the sand on the seashore. Your descendants will take possession of the cities of their enemies, and through your offspring all nations of the earth will be blessed, because you have obeyed me." All right. Take a look at this. Did God tell Abraham verbally, out loud, in a deep bass voice, "Take your son and kill him"? What do you think?
It was in his head. Right?
Huh?
It was in his head, right?
That's what I think, but not everybody agrees with me.
That's what I think.
You see, Abraham, remember, this is the beginning of the nation. They didn't have a Bible. The Bible didn't come into existence until the Old Testament, until 98 BC, right before the birth of Christ. They didn't have a Bible. They didn't even have any religious manuscripts. What did they have to go on to know who God was and what he was about?
Story.
They didn't have much of anything. Now, Abraham and Sarah lived among the people of Molech. And the people of Molech sacrificed their firstborn son to appease their God. So Abraham is living here among the people of Molech, and God has said to him, "I'm going to create a new nation for you." Well, Abraham gets to thinking, am I not as responsible to God as my pagan neighbors who sacrifice their firstborn son to appease their God? Is my God not more worthy than the God of the pagans? Now, this has to be going on in Abraham's head as this experience takes place. And so, he says, I've got to do this, because my God is more worthy than these pagan gods. And as he thinks about it, he comes to the conclusion that, yeah, God wants this out of me. I feel like God said this to me. I feel like I've got to do it. Now let me ask you a question. Testimonial time. Have you ever felt really strongly that God was leading you to do something, and come to find out he wasn't? Any testimonies? I'll give you one. When I was a pastor in Siloam Springs, Arkansas, the church in Little Rock that Matt is getting ready to go to, Pulaski Heights Baptist Church, called me, and come to find out later, they had been after John McClanahan for over a year. John McClanahan was pastor at First Baptist Church, Pine Bluff, Arkansas. And they'd tried their best to get John to come, and John wouldn't do it. So they said, John, who do you think we ought to call if you won't come? And John gave them my name. So they call me and they say, would you mind sending us a resume? Well, I sent them a resume. I've always tried to be open-minded about things. So I sent them a resume. And to be honest, it was probably the richest church in Arkansas per capita at that time. The community's declined since then, that's no longer the case. But it was a very wealthy congregation, running about 500 or 600, one of the best churches in Arkansas. And so I sent them a resume. Well, a couple of weeks later, they called back and said, would you mind if we call some of your seminary professors as references? I said, no, that's fine. A couple of weeks later, they called back and said, would you mind if we call the references you have listed on your resume? No, that'd be fine. Well, as this process wears on, I'm feeling more and more that I need to call the moving van. And then a few weeks later, they called back and said, would you and your wife agree to have dinner with us on, they set a date 2 or 3 weeks later, and on Saturday night, and then we'll stay for church on Sunday and hear you preach. Okay. So when that Saturday came, I took my weekly bath and washed my hair, got everything ready, and they didn't show. Didn't show. No call, nothing. Wasted the bath. So, about a month later, Central Baptist Church of Bearden in Knoxville, Tennessee, came. Now, I can't tell you how agonizing that was, that month in between, because I had misread God altogether. I felt in my bones that I ought to go to Pulaski Heights Baptist Church. And about a month later, the church from Knoxville came and called us, twice the size of the church in Little Rock, and twice the opportunity. 12 of the best years of our lives were in Knoxville, Tennessee. Yet, I was dead certain, I was dead certain that we ought to be going to Little Rock.
Did that Pulaski church ever give you a reason why they never called you or anything?
Never heard a word. I found out the reason later.
That's just bad manners all there.
Oh, yeah. But I found out the reason later. I was on the Northwest Arkansas BSU Council. Isn't that a fancy title? That meant we met twice a year with the BSU director at the University of Arkansas and encouraged and supported him. And so our meeting, our fall meeting was in late November, and we met, and I sat down beside a pastor from Fayetteville who turned to me and said to me, I had already announced my resignation to go to Knoxville. So this pastor turns to me and he says, Bill, I want to confess my sin to you. I said, I'm not Catholic. And he said, no, I mean it. I've sinned against you and sinned against the Lord, and I want to confess it. Okay. And he says, an A.B. Dick salesman. You remember the A.B. Dick product? He said an A.B. Dick salesman was in our office. And he was a member of the search committee at Pulaski Heights Baptist Church. And he asked me what I thought of you. And I said, well, Bill's a liberal, you don't want to do anything. And he said, and they have since called someone who's much more liberal than you, so I have sinned. And I couldn't believe he had the audacity to tell me. But at any rate, that's the reason. The A.B. Dick salesman got the word that I was
You can't trust those guys, can you?
And so that was the reason. But I say that to illustrate the point that we can believe all we want to believe, that this is what God wants us to do, when it may be our own misunderstanding of God and not God's will.
What if it's where it is God's will and somewhere in the, there's lots of people involved in a decision that a change took place and it changed the path?
But that's always a possibility.
I hate to think that everything I would think was, God leading me, and then all of a sudden it just disappears, that it was because I didn't have enough faith or something.
Well, I don't think you need to lay that on yourself. I really don't. All of us make decisions at the time based on the best knowledge we have. And best knowledge I had was that church was probably gonna pay me a lot more money than I was making. And it was a lot more opportunity than this little town in northwest Arkansas. But we all make decisions based on the best knowledge we have. And that's the reason I think Abraham made this decision to carry Isaac up on top of Mount Moriah. Because the best information he had was the information he lived with among the people that he lived with. And so he thought, that's what I ought to do. And God intervened and provided a ram. And a lamb was the most acceptable sacrifice among the people he lived with other than your own child. And so God provided here at the last minute. Now, more to the story. In 1970, the Southern Baptist Convention met in Denver, Colorado. And they announced the publication of a new Brahman commentary set that went on sale there in the convention center in Denver. Well, there had been multiple people at the Sunday School Board who had reviewed this commentary set to make sure it was orthodox. And one of the reviewers of the book of Genesis said Davies, who was the British theologian who wrote the commentary for the book of Genesis, Baptist British theologian, one of the reviewers said that Davies was dead wrong. Davies had the opinion that we discussed this morning, and which I believe is the right opinion, that it was Abraham's thought, not an audible voice from God, but Abraham's thought, this is what God wanted to do. So that's what Davies wrote in his commentary. Well, the war broke out because this reviewer told one of his prominent friends that this commentary was liberal and that the Bible ought to be taken literally, word for word. And so after what seemed like 150 hours of debate and discussion, the motion was made that we withdraw volume 1 from the Broadman commentary and have it rewritten to satisfy the word for word folks in the convention center. Well, I immediately ran downstairs and bought volume 1. Because I knew it was gonna be a priceless treasure, since not many of them had been printed. But that was the beginning of the Southern Baptist Convention wars between people who think the Bible ought to be interpreted word for word, literally. And every time I see one of those folks, I point out to them that they still have 2 hands and 2 eyes. And the Bible says, cut off your hand if it offends you, pluck out your eye if it offends you. I don't know of anybody who takes the Bible literally. I know of folks who say they do, but I don't know of anyone who does. I don't. And Genesis chapter 22 was the start of the wars in Southern Baptist life. And so there it is. Now, Dennis, I can give you back 15 minutes, or I can give you back however much time these folks want to discuss. You have any questions or discussions about?
If they got questions, let's talk about that. Yeah.
Chapter 22.
I had just a really, I don't think Barbara Peterson still has that, but that's why I always had 2 volumes of Genesis in the Broadway commentary when I was church librarian.
Yep.
It's that story that you just told.
Well,
Yes, sir.
read the first one seriously.
Pardon?
Read the first one.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Oh, seriously, yes.
Just a question,
Yeah.
same chapter, and you're reading, and, these 3 guys showed up, and one of them told Abraham Sarah that she's gonna have a baby, and son of a gun, she didn't believe it, no way at her age,
Yeah.
but it happened.
Mhm.
Well, why wouldn't he then believe that God said, hey, take that kid now, he's got a baby, and you're gonna sacrifice him?
Yeah, it's hard,
I
isn't
mean,
it?
if they weren't just back to back,
Yeah.
but I mean, he had just heard him.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, maybe he thought it heard him the second time.
Yeah, I'm convinced that Abraham thought this is what he
Yeah.
ought to do.
Hard for us
No
to
doubt about it.
imagine what an early Bronze Age tribal leader might, how he might think, and people, there's no law, no prophets.
And, I mean, you can't get around the fact that it was an admirable act
Yeah.
on Abraham's part.
I'm sure Isaac didn't think that.
No, you wonder what Sarah's thought process is in this whole thing. If Abraham told her, he may not have told her because women had a very, in the background approach to life in that day and time. So he may not have told her. But you see what Isaac thought about it. Where's the line?
One thing I've always found interesting is taking the line that maybe God didn't really know what Abraham would do. That's like Greek ideas, which they were not familiar with, and omniscience. And because when Abraham starts to do it, God stops him and says, now I know. And that implies to me he didn't know before until Abraham decided it. Now I know.
Yeah, got him right up to the edge.
Yeah, then he says, do not lay your hand on the boy or do anything to him, for now I know that you fear God. And to me that implies he didn't know, so God was testing Abraham to see if he would do it or not.
And I think it's, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm finished.
No, I think it's so interesting because God told Abraham several times that he would make him a great nation. And going into that, I hope with that faith, that would have also, I don't know what I'm trying to say, that would have made a difference somehow.
I'm not sure what I heard you say.
I know, I'm not sure I did either, except that hopefully Abraham had the faith that God would preserve Isaac, since he had said, I shall make of you a great nation.
That it was
And-
more, that it was more of a turning point for Abraham. Or that it brought out what Abraham's true thoughts were, of the situation. Is that what you're saying?
I don't know.
Oh.
I think God heard him say that, but I also think that Abraham had been told several times that he would have descendants.
And how in the world is that gonna happen at his age?
Right,
Especially if you kill your only
He
son.
killed his boy.
right.
Well, let me conclude by talking a little about systematic theology. And that is, all of our theology ought to fit into a system, that we are consistent in our theology, and particularly consistent in interpreting the Bible so that God is consistent. And sometimes we get conflicting views of God in the Bible. And so in trying to make all of the Bible fit into a consistent view of God, we need to weigh what this says about the nature of God versus what we know the Bible says about the nature of God. And when we try to develop and apply systematic theology to passages like this, we need to say, what do we know about God from the rest of the Bible? And does this fit with what we know about God in the whole Bible? And when we apply that principle to this passage, we see that when you take the Bible as a whole, Satan is the tempter. And God is the one who rescues us from temptation. And so, was Satan using Abraham's neighbors to make Abraham think this is what I ought to do? And we see that God comes to the rescue, as he does time after time after time in the history of the children of Israel.
Sounds to me more like God was testing Abraham's faith. Just how faithful are you?
Mhm.
What
Yeah.
degree do you go to?
Except the rest of the Bible doesn't lend itself to that being the nature of God. The rest of the Bible seems to say, like in Job, that Satan is the tempter and God is the rescuer. And I have no doubt that Abraham thought this is what he ought to do. No doubt at all.
Well, God could use Satan to get his will done too. Because Satan could tempt him, but then God could intervene.
Yeah, he could, but that's not his normal pattern. His normal pattern is to use his faithful people to accomplish his will.
Well, he had so few of them at this time.
Yeah. One last thought. Mount Moriah, where Abraham takes his son to sacrifice to God, is the same mountain that in the time of Jesus was called Calvary. Very same mountain. So on this mountain, where God said to Abraham, no, you're not going to do that, he provides his own son for us. And that's the gospel. Dennis?
Thank you, Bill. Appreciate that very much. Okay, let's go through our prayer requests. And, we got off Sunday to church. Okay, for Robert and Bonnie are continuing to travel. We think they'll be back at the end of February, depending on family needs. They're gonna be moving from their children in South Florida to the northwest to Washington State in Olympia to help their grandson who's broken a leg and is in a wheelchair. So they're gonna be traveling. And the family and friends of Bill O'Brien on his death yesterday morning. I asked to pray for my nephew Grant, who was in an injury that is gonna take a while to recover from.
Yeah, he pulled his hip flexor and broke a bone, like a chip of bone off when it happened, so he's out for the rest of the season and can't try out for the travel team, so
What was
it's
he
kinda
doing when he
playing basketball.
just playing basketball?
Yeah.
Who knew it was so dangerous?
Well, I mean, it's one of those things, his muscle, at his age, the muscles can be stronger than the bones are, and so that's kind of, anyway. So yeah, just that he'll be able to keep us, and like, he can't put any weight on it right now, it's hard to get around school.
He's a big hockey player too, isn't he?
He's a basketball player, this
Oh,
is the
okay.
younger one,
Okay.
yeah.
Oh, good.
This is your nephew?
Yeah.
All right. Ray Snow has bronchitis and extremely bad cough, so that's something that, that Laura, you've been helping him with and caused you to miss some Sundays, and we're sorry about that. How's Ray?
He hasn't gotten much better. I finally got him to the doctor on Friday. I'm learning, y'all don't know, he does have dementia from a stroke in 2006. And anyway, I've learned that I'm gonna have to go ahead and just make those appointments and say, okay, you got the appointment, we're going today, so.
Okay, we'll certainly pray for Ray on this one. Sorry about that. Laura wrote continued prayers for Dean, my sister-in-law. She's probably gonna do the open heart surgery in February. And at 82, so it's a very risky thing, but they tried 12 other things they were there at Mayo Clinic for 10 days, and they had 12 different things they were gonna go through, and every one of them, for one reason or another, didn't pan out, so.
Well,
they'll go
she's the
back.
best place she could be, and they wouldn't, I don't think they'd recommend it if they didn't think.
Is she physically fit?
I agree.
She's probably, well, at 82, she's probably somewhat overweight like I am, but she's gets around,
Okay.
So, but anyway, they found unfortunately 2 problems with the heart while they were at Mayo. They only found one here, they found a second one there. Okay, Paul Skelton, knee surgery, and Chris Peterson, dental surgery. Anybody know when the Paul's surgery is, or?
Now, Chris is Barbara's son, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll pray for both.
Sorry, what was Chris's?
Yeah.
Chris Peterson is having
Paul's
dental surgery.
dental
That's
knee
being
surgery.
done tomorrow. And I'm sorry, y'all, Paul told me when he was having surgery and just went in one day out the other. But I think it's sometime next week.
Okay. And Chris Peterson, this is Barbara's son, so.
This is Barbara's son, and the surgery is tomorrow, and it's really extensive. It is something that he's been needing to do for years. And Barbara and I have been praying about it, and it's finally going to
Okay.
happen, so, yeah.
Very good. Anything else to add to our list?
I wanted to just say a nice praise or something, because my dad had his pacemaker battery replaced last Monday. He didn't talk about stuff like that. But his heart rate was down to 40, and he was feeling really tired. He didn't want to come over every night, and then it went like smooth. He's 92, and he feels better already, you can tell. So
Good.
I'm thankful for that. Because your heart down to 40, you feel like,
Right.
Robert,
Yeah.
we're glad for that good report. That's good. Okay. Anything else? Let's pray, and thank you for coming today. And thank you, Bill, for leading us. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day and time to come and read your scripture and study your word. Help us to understand what you want us to do and what we have for us to do that sometimes is not what we're thinking, but will probably be validated by others around us and by other things that happen in our life. We appreciate Robert and Bonnie in helping their children in Florida and soon flying to Washington State to help their grandson there. give them safe travels until they return to us. We pray for the family of Bill O'Brien, his family and friends upon his death on Saturday morning.